The whole spiritual path, if we want to summarize the approaches, if we want to keep it simple, beyond all techniques, there are two main modalities that we could distinguish and summarize in this way. Two approaches of the heart, two approaches when it comes to devotion, when it comes to divinity, when it comes to your love for God, when it comes to your love for self-realization, when it comes to your God for purity of service. And that is will or focus. And you could roughly call this the masculine path, or surrender. So this means that in any situation or any experience that you find yourself in, whether you're already flying high or whether you're kind of in a depressed state or a challenging situation or an emotionally dense, rich environment, you can always fall back. Okay, if you don't remember anything, like any of the methods, any of the techniques, and nothing works for you, which is typically why it happens when you feel completely overwhelmed or like stuck. It tends to be your higher self trying to guide you to kind of just like plunge into the heart, like drop everything you know, surrender basically, but can also come through focus or will. So I'll clarify these two kind of main paths of the same path. Let's take focusing. So let's say you're in an emotionally rich state, right? And I mean that kind of facetiously, when you're like an emotional wreck or like things are just like chaotic, your mind's chaotic. None of the methods you've ever heard me share kind of work in that moment. You don't know which mantra to use, and you're trying too hard, and it's this and that. So, and you basically what you're trying to do, if you're just in a normal state, you're kind of, in a sense, for the most part, you're trying to control yourself more, right? Now, it's not a positive term, maybe, but in a sense, we are disciplining ourselves on a moment-to-moment basis. If you're just in sort of a normal state, your day-to-day state, but you are contemplating spirituality, you are maybe listening to video or audio, you are maybe meditating, but there's no real distress, there's no real blockage happening in that moment. There's no life or death kind of challenge. For the most part, what you're doing is you're gaining a little bit of mastery every day. You're gaining a little bit more mindfulness, a little bit more control or discipline over your experience, over your self-knowledge. But again, when shit hits the fan, or when you're just having an afflictive state or intense emotional inner environment, then, or your mind just kind of spins out and it doesn't know which technique to apply right now. You can always fall back on one of these two things. And typically surrender will be the easiest. If you're in the state I just described, like the sort of chaotic, nothing works kind of state, surrender is typically the most accessible option. But I'll start with the other one, which is focus or will. And roughly, again, you could say it's the more masculine path, if you will. So let's say your mind's going nuts. You've already cycled through 1,000 different spiritual techniques and nothing seems to work or last or stick. Maybe you had like 5 seconds of relief, but then it disappeared. You tried the same technique and it doesn't work anymore. Try a different mantra, and you all probably know these states of mind. So, and what I'm about to share is not exclusive to when you're in an afflictive state. I'm just saying that's kind of when your higher self pushes you into the very heart of what spirituality is about. It pushes you, it forces you into the very core modality, the very core attitudes that spirituality comes back down to at the end of the day, when all methods are pushed aside. And that is simple focus, simple harnessing of will, harnessing of focus. So when your mind goes nuts, or when your emotions go nuts, or your circumstances go nuts, or people around you go nuts, or whatever it is, the world goes nuts. If all you can do is just focus, doesn't matter on what. Doesn't matter on what. Not so much. It matters a little bit, but not initially. It matters that you enter a state of focus, that you're able to gather your will. If all you can do is just remember that and say anytime, and see that anytime you move out of that state of presence, of focus, of consciousness, it hurts because you're already in a chaos. You're already in a chaotic momentum. You're already in a downward spiral. You know, your life outside, the external imagination seems to suggest, you're suggesting it, but it seems to suggest that it is not going so well, or it is kind of stuck, or it's not as you want it to be. But you don't have the bandwidth to feel good about it anyway. You don't have the bandwidth to take a leap of faith and imagine your desired reality and stay true to that. But what you can do, especially if you've pre-trained this a little bit with attention span, with concentration, the meditation mastery retreat, and so forth, if you've applied these things, it becomes easier and easier to just kind of rein yourself in. So this is a positive form of self-control, okay? So it's not control in the negative sense. You're surrendering to your focus, if you will. That's all that there's left for you right now. So all you do is you enter a state of focus. You replace as many thoughts as you can with focusing. As much of your thinking, if you're like 99% thinking, turn it into 98% thinking and 2% focus, or 95% thinking and 5% focus. And even if you do it by that much, if you increase how much you change the activity of thinking with the activity of focusing, of being present, being focused, willing yourself to be focused. If you do it even 5% more than you did before, you're going to find massive relief. You're going to find massive contrast in your state before that. And you're going to be able to reconnect to that higher self that is speaking ease and soothing energy and peace into you all the time. Does this make sense? But it's not something that we typically can do if we're not trained. So this is why concentration is a helpful exercise, because it does give you much greater mastery over times when your mind is kind of out of control.